You do not have to work 80-hour weeks, sacrifice time with your family and friends, and have hundreds of thousands of dollars in your bank to run a $1 million a year business portfolio, because I'm living proof of this. I run my portfolio boarding businesses I've acquired over the past few years, and on average, I work about 5 hours a week on them. You don't need $1 million to invest. You don't need to sacrifice seeing your kids growing up or put your marriage at risk for money. In this video, I'll explain exactly how I do it so you can too. And it all starts with having a management team in place. All right, so we only look at businesses that already have a GM who's already in place, or 1 to 3 managers who are largely autonomous and they manage the daily tasks in those businesses. Another rule that we always live by is having the management team or the GM, they have had to already been in place over a year before you're purchasing it. We wanna make sure that there is an actual performance data on how well they've performed in that position. So a lot of times sellers, when they're getting ready to sell a business, what they'll do is they'll say, hey, we're selling a business and we're gonna go ahead and do the task of going out and hiring the GM for you. So by the time that you take over, we have this person who's already running the day-to-day. And while that is a nice gesture, while that might be helpful, and maybe it's a great person that they're finding as the GM, it's not a good option. And here's the reason why. That person is a new employee. Regardless of their experience, regardless of how long they've been doing what they're doing, or if they've done the exact same work that they're doing now, they are a new employee to that business. And when you go and purchase a business, you don't want a new employee running the day-to-day. You want someone who's been there and done that and has data to back up how well they've done in that particular position. Another important aspect of this is making sure that you're starting with the end in mind. All right, so day one, you are not a fully involved owner. Now, when you first get a deal done, in the first 3 months, it is definitely going to be a lot of work. The transition period over the first 3 months is going to be a lot because you are coming in as a new owner. There's a lot of systems that have to be turned over to you. There's obviously changing of accounts, there's changing of contracts, there's changing of employment agreements. There's a lot of things going on. But after the first 3 months, everything should start to be passed on to the GM or however you have structured your management that's in place, and you are pulling yourself out of the day-to-day. And you need to start that from day one with that in mind, that you are not going to be a management owner. You're not going to be an owner-operator. You are going to be an owner that is minimally involved in the day-to-day business. You're going to focus on owner management things like payroll, how we're doing in sales, strategic decisions, how can we grow the company. You are not the one who's going to be servicing customers or building a product. Okay, and that's important that you have that from day one going into this. Everybody knows in the company that you are not going to be the person that is managing the day-to-day. Okay, so let's actually back up the train a little bit and actually talk about the search process, because when you're searching for businesses that you're looking to purchase, one of the criteria that you need to have while searching is that the owner is not very involved in the day-to-day. Now, there's definitely businesses out there that are great businesses where the owner's running everything, and if you want to buy a job or you want to replace the owner in their day-to-day, that's great. There's a lot of businesses out there just for you. But if you want to buy businesses like I do, where you're not running the day-to-day, and like my students, most of them, they're buying businesses that they're not running the day-to-day, then what you got to make sure is you're looking for businesses where the management team is already in place, and that management team does not include the owner. So one of the questions that we first ask when we talk with a broker is, how involved is the owner in this business? On a weekly basis, how many hours do they work? What are the specific tasks that these owners do during the week? And hopefully the broker has these answers. If they don't, which is actually more often than not, have them go and get those answers, bring them back to you. And if it turns out that the business has a very, very involved owner that's managing most of the important tasks of the business, this is something that you probably should not be going after, unless that is the type of business that you want to be getting a job in. Now, one of the really cool signs when you're doing a search and you're finding a business for sale, when it says that the owner is semi-absentee, that's a good signal. Now, the broker wants to sell this business. So a lot of times a broker is going to say semi-absentee when they mean slightly less than full-time, which is not what semi-absentee means. Semi-absentee to me means that the owner is still involved strategically. They do work on the business, but the owner lives in Florida and the business is located in Virginia. And they visit maybe once or twice a year for the annual Christmas party and maybe to go out there to meet with the GM in person. That is a semi-absentee business owner. And those businesses are great, not only because the owner has already removed themselves, not just from the day-to-day, but also from the state or from the locality where the business is, but also from a lending perspective. It's much easier to get a loan on a business like that when you don't live in the state, because the owner has already shown that you can run this business successfully based on the data of the last 3 years of the tax returns and the P&Ls, and you can continue that trend without having to be there in person. And so when you find a truly semi-absentee business for sale, typically they're going to sell at a much higher multiple, definitely between 3 and 4, and those are going to be very popular, so you're going to have to jump on that pretty quickly. Now, if you want to learn how to start your own journey in acquiring boring businesses without breaking the bank and protecting your time every single week, scan the QR code on the screen or click the top link in the description down below, and I'll give you all the necessary tools to succeed. All right. Next up, there's a thing that for me is non-negotiable if you truly want to protect your time after acquiring your next boring business. Systems and processes are essential and non-negotiable. Preferably, they are already in place, have already been operating for years, and you can see the results in the data of the business you're looking to buy. Now, what do we mean by systems and processes? We mean that the business is running on a set of repeatable, recurring tasks that all team members are really well trained on. So when we have a lead who comes in, what happens next? And everyone that's on that team can raise their hand and they can walk you through the entire process. It is all documented, preferably not just on a document, but also video. So the training for new people to come on is not only something where they're going to be reading exactly what to do, but they also can watch training videos. It's much easier for them to understand exactly what then is expected of them. And they can go through that hiring process and become a productive employee much quicker than if those systems and processes were not in place. Also, you can hold someone accountable when you have something written down for exactly how it's supposed to be. If you just say, hey, go do this task, and they go and they try to figure out themselves and you don't like the end result, well, then it's hard to be mad at them because you didn't tell them exactly what you expected. If you give them a document and say, hey, this is how we process leads, this is how we bring them through our pipeline, this is how we do a sale, this is how we do our onboarding, step by step by step, then when they do not do that, now you can hold them accountable because you've given them the exact instructions and yet they did not fulfill on their obligation to do them. If you don't have systems, you can't have accountability. In order to have a good business and a growing business, you need to have systems so you can have accountability. Now, outside of systems and processes, the next thing that we need is the 3 pillars, okay? These 3 pillars are something that I look at in every single deal. I tell my students that they need to do this as well. These are 3 pillars that make a great deal. Now, just because the business has these 3 pillars doesn't mean that you buy it. It just means that it has a good foundation, and now we move on to the second stage and third stage of our diligence. So the first is recurring revenue. This just means that it's not a subscription-based business. It doesn't have to be that. It means that when you bring on a customer once, they're going to be coming back to you within a 1 calendar year. So within 12 months, whatever service that this business sells or product it serves, that customer is going to need to buy more than once per year. Okay, that's recurring revenue. Barrier to entry. This means that there is some type of moat around the business. So for example, I like buying accounting firms. Now, accounting firms are great because they do have recurring revenue that we just mentioned. They also have a barrier to entry, meaning tomorrow, you who are watching this, most likely you're not an accountant. You can't just go out tomorrow and start being an accountant, right? It takes training, it takes expertise. Sometimes it takes going to college, getting a degree. And so this is something that is a barrier for anyone to just start to compete with you. They have to go through a series of tasks that are long. We're talking years in training. It costs money. So it's a big obligation and it's a big burden for them to go through that process. We like that because it makes it to where there's limited competitors entering your market at any given time. The last one is recession resistance. We want businesses that are resistant to the macroeconomic trends. Okay, so if we were to go into recession or, God forbid, a depression, what are the businesses that people would still need to use and buy? Okay, we mentioned these before. Accounting firms. Are taxes going to go away in a recession or a depression? The answer is no. So that service is needed regardless of what is going in the macroeconomic arena. Take that same example, put it to HVAC, put it to plumbing. These are all essential services that people need regardless if they're doing really well at their jobs or not. Okay, so we're looking at businesses that people are going to use. Take away the trendy stuff, take away a lot of new franchises that are trying to come on a new trend. Those things come and gone, they're a flash in the pan. We want things that are sticking around. Now, even if these pillars are in place, there's another thing that I see people overlooking time and again, resulting in them being very involved in the day-to-day just to keep the business afloat. We want an industry that has tailwinds, not headwinds. What are tailwinds and headwinds? Okay, so it's a nautical term, but a tailwind is when the wind is blowing behind you, so it pushes you forward, right? So if you're a ship and you have a sail and the wind comes up behind you, it's going to push that sail, which then pushes the ship. Those are good, right? A headwind means the wind is now coming in the opposite direction. It's pushing against where you want to go. go. It's pushing this ship backward instead of where it wants to go forward. So there are a lot of industries out there, and there's a lot of different things that are happening in those industries. Sometimes industries are dying, and that's just the natural cycle of business. Do not buy into an industry that's dying. Now, how do you figure that out? Now, a lot of this is open source. You can go on ChatGPT, Claude, you can go on Google, and you can look up industry reports. You can see GDP of that particular industry every single year. Look over the last 10 to 20 years and see where this industry is heading. Obviously, AI is a huge thing. It's disrupting a lot of businesses right now. So is this business that you're buying into, is that going to be meaningfully disruptive AI, or is AI going to help it be way more efficient and be able to scale easier? Which is also helping with many different types of businesses right now with AI. So make sure you're looking at it and understanding how that's going to be affected. So let's say the business you acquired has checked all the boxes so far. Even then, you can still screw it up pretty hard if you forget the next step or not see the importance of this next step, and that is proper incentives. Having a great team is awesome, but if you can't keep them around, you're going to sink the business. Now, we talked about previously in the video about GMs and management, and these are all great structures to where you're able to take yourself out of the day-to-day as the owner. But how do you keep them there doing the work and doing a great job? And the answer is incentivizing them properly. Most business owners are not good at this. They look too much in the short term and not in the long term. They try to haggle on salaries, they try to haggle on compensation, and then they're surprised 6 months to 12 months later when someone who's been working faithfully for them for the last 3 to 5 years, they leave and they go find a better place that treats them better. People are going to operate on incentives. So wherever they're going to be treated best, that is where they're going to go. So when we're looking at this, how do we properly incentivize our GMs and our management? We need to make sure that they are being paid as an owner. So if we're talking specifically right now about a GM, if that GM is running the day-to-day, they are acting as the owner, and you want them to be incentivized just like an owner is. How is an owner incentivized? They're incentivized by profit. They're incentivized by growing revenue. They're incentivized by cutting costs, because at the end of the day, that's going to be seen in their profit distributions. The same thing, the same principle will then apply to a GM. The GM, you want them to be looking at cutting costs, building better systems and making things more efficient, letting people go who are no longer doing a great job and are carrying the company in a direction that they don't want to be carried in. Going out there and being proactive in gaining more revenue, making sure that customers are excited about doing work with you and building those relationships. Those are all the hallmarks of a great GM, which are also the hallmarks of a great owner. And so we want to make sure that GM is incentivized. So what does that mean? That means a base salary that is competitive. But here's the kicker. We're also going to be putting in an incentive package for that GM or that manager to where they're able to double their original salary by performance objectives being hit. So let's say you want to grow the business by 20% in revenue this year. Well, if that happens and you're going to tie it to specific deliverables, then that GM would be able to get a percentage of that growth. And by doing the math, sometimes it's doing 2% of gross revenue, sometimes it's less, depending on the size of the business. Sometimes it's tied to the amount that has growth. So if there's 20% in growth, then they're going to get 10% of that growth. You can come up with a couple different metrics, but the goal is to get close to 75 to 100% of their base salary if they were to hit those objectives. And we're not going to make those objectives impossible, but they're definitely going to be something where it is going to move the business in the right direction, giving it enough of a lift to make it worthy of paying them that salary. The goal is you can pay them double what you pay their salary, and yet you're still making more money because they've hit these goals. Properly incentivizing each of your employees is also critical, not just the GM, all the way down. I love being able to give them a competitive salary, and then we focus on profit, we focus on growth, and we come up with numbers that if everyone hits their metrics, every single person can see a substantial amount of more money if they're performing and if those metrics are being hit. It causes a team atmosphere. Everyone celebrates the wins because everyone is benefiting. Now, I hear you thinking, I don't have the money to acquire a boring business, let alone do I know how to run one. Believe me, I thought the same thing when I was researching this whole adventure before I acquired my first business. But once you understand how to do this next step, you'll be amazed at how acquiring any business that checks all the boxes we just discussed can be life-changing. This step is called partnering on the deal. Okay, so this is what I've done now for most of my deals. I go out and I find great operators and make them partners. They're gonna be the face, they're also gonna be the point of contact for the business. Now, let's say for me, I now have built up a pretty big network. I get deals sent to me all the time. I find an amazing deal. And I also have a pretty big network of those operators and people who want to buy businesses. And I'm able to match that amazing deal with this amazing operator. I put everything together. We get the financing, we get the structure, all of it's done and closed. And for that, I am taking a stake in this business. Sometimes it's minority, sometimes it's majority, depending on the deal. When there's an issue at the business and it's 8 o'clock at night and someone's getting a call, it is not going to be me. It is going to be that operating partner. Now, they're going to be properly incentivized. A lot of times they're majority equity holders. On top of that, they're getting a great portion of the distributions and a great salary. So they're very happy to do that. And for that, they're getting an amazing experience. And now they can go on and continue building up their own portfolio. So by doing a partner on the deal type strategy, you are going out and utilizing your ability to find deals, to find the lending or financing investors, however you're going to make sure that this thing gets closed. And you're also finding that key aspect, which is that operating partner, putting them into the deal. And by doing that, you're able to walk away with not a completely passive, but a much more passive way of business ownership. And you can move on and repeat it again and again and do this. And I have students that are now closing 4 deals in the span of 24 months. And it's because after their first deal, they started going down this path of being able to find deals because they know how to do that now. They know how to structure them. They know how to bring lending and financing and investors and everything else to make sure that this deal can close. And then they walk away with a good portion of it. And now they're going to be receiving distribution checks from that business. Now, if you still think you need to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank to acquire your first boring business, I want to challenge that idea. If you click the video right here, I'll explain step by step how you can acquire your first boring business, spending virtually no money at all, and start working towards that $1 million a year portfolio sooner rather than later. Talk to you soon.